So, Janelle, sounds like the state legislature might be warming a bit to the idea of doing a mid-decade redistricting like Texas. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so House Speaker Daniel Perez has said that he is creating a redistricting committee. He hasn't said who will be on that committee yet. He expects to announce those names sometime in September. But it is the first major step towards doing a mid-decade round of redistricting, and it's aligning with what President Trump is calling for on sort of a more national level, putting a lot of pressure on red states across the country, states like Texas, which we have obviously a lot of headlines coming out of there with most of their Democrats in their state legislature currently out of state in order to break quorum so that they can't vote on redistricting. And in the Lone Star State, Ohio is getting some pressure. So this is really a nationwide trend, and it's largely rooted in the fact that, typically speaking, and there is historical precedent going back long before you and I were ever even on this earth, that midterms benefit the party that's not in power in Washington. So this year, that's Democrats. So there's largely expected to be an advantage for Democrats based on current maps. The GOP only has a 3-seat majority in the House right now. So just a few gains across the country by Democrats would shift the balance of power in the House. They're also looking to reclaim the Senate, where there's also a narrow majority. So Republicans are saying the quiet part out loud. Gerrymandering districts is nothing new. Both parties have done it forever. But they usually keep a straight face while they try to say that's not what they're doing. This time, they're just straight up saying it. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, a couple of things. The Senate's going to be a bit harder for Democrats to retake. And I think a lot of people might be listening and saying, boy, the numbers that we're seeing in terms of how Americans view the Democratic Party, how would it be possible that they would retake the House? Well, in these kinds of midterm elections, really not about the party out of power. It's a referendum on the party in power. And you also have the party out of power. They're just more energized to turn out. So Democrats could have rough polling numbers right now, which they do, and still have an advantage in the upcoming midterms.
Well, and they desperately need this election cycle, the 2026 midterm election cycle, to really reclaim some of their power. And it's a bigger deal now than I think it ever has been for the party. A, because they are suffering from a little bit of a perception crisis among their base. And then also because we've never seen a president like Donald Trump. Even Donald Trump 1.0 was way different than Donald Trump 2.0. The assertion that he has, taken over the courts and kind of just throwing out democratic norms is nothing like what we saw in his first term. So Democrats are definitely fired up. And if they're able to reclaim the House, they can lead committees and launch investigations. And that is something that Donald Trump is not going to take lying down.
Well, in a sense, they would make him, at least from a legislative standpoint, although that's not really stopping the president these days, but at least from a legislative standpoint, they could make him basically a lame duck pretty early by blocking anything that he wants to get done. Bringing it back to Florida for a second, it sounded originally like there were some Republican lawmakers here in the state who didn't really want to go down this mid-decade redistricting road. You've got, of course, the House Speaker who has come out and taken the first steps towards doing that. But have we heard from the Senate President? What about Governor DeSantis? Where does the party, more broadly speaking, stand right now?
Yeah, so Senate President Ben Albritton was definitely in the I'm not sure about this camp in the early days when it was first floated. And you have to understand this is something that came not just from the president, but also from Governor DeSantis. And, there hasn't been a lot of love lost between lawmakers this year and the governor. Some rifts in those relationships have come into full view. So there might have been a little bit to do with that. I think you're going to see Republicans all fall into line when you have, even with all of the questions about the Epstein files and whether or not the economy is going to take a huge tumble. The Republican Party is still very much in lockstep with its president, and I think they will definitely fall in line. So any reluctance, I think you're going to see that evaporate.
We're joined by Southeast Politics publisher Janelle Irwin Taylor. You can find all of her work at southeastpolitics.com. Unlike in Texas, where Democrats were able to flee the state to at least temporarily prevent that redistricting plan from moving forward, here in Florida, Democrats, they'd be powerless to stop it, right?
That's a great question. I'm not 100% certain how many Democrats would need to flee to break quorum in Florida, but I'm pretty sure there's enough. Don't quote me on that. Here I am on live radio saying, don't quote me on that. But
I had thought that the quorum was a bit different here. It was a simple majority or something along those lines. And Democrats, they have a very tiny minority in the legislature right now. So they're at a big disadvantage.
I've got notes on just about everything you could have asked me except for that question. So I apologize for looking like the ding dong here. But I think one of the things that I wanted to throw out there was Republicans are operating under this idea that doing a mid-decade redistricting and not counting undocumented immigrants, because that's a huge part of this conversation. Donald Trump wants a whole new census that doesn't count undocumented immigrants, and that's exactly what Governor DeSantis has called for as well. And their argument is that you have had counting undocumented immigrants benefiting blue states at the detriment of red states. And what people have found in studying that assumption is that it's actually negligible, and whatever numbers do exist to support that undocumented immigrants have any changes or impacts on the census count and how congressional districts are apportioned is negligible and affects both red and blue states.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is this one of those things that's going to blow up in their face? Because if you don't count undocumented immigrants, Governor DeSantis is banking on getting a whole other congressional district for the state of Florida. But if you don't count undocumented immigrants, that might not actually be the case.
Right. What I've wondered in talking about this previously, we've certainly had a huge influx of people from other states since the pandemic, which has increased our population here in Florida. But we also have a big number, despite the fact the state is working hard to detain and deport as many illegal immigrants as possible. We have a large number of them here in Florida. So, so I don't know if that offsets itself, but certainly we're going to be a state to watch moving forward. Southeast Politics publisher Janelle Irwin Taylor with us. You can find her reporting at southeastpolitics.com, and you can find her on X for more at Janelle Irwin FL. Janelle, great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you.